Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Reckless speculation.
Reckless speculation.
That's right. From all corners of the globe, it is Mackey and Judd, daily Minnesota sports entertainment on a Reckless Speculation Thursday. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, executive producer, Declan Goff, and our friend Darren Doogie Wolfson from the 5 Eyewitness News Sports Department and the Scoop podcast, and he brings inside information about Minnesota sports teams. What's going on, Dukes? We want to go all in on Timberwolves. They've been so active the last few days. It's like those high-pitched noises that only dogs can hear. Like, you got to look hard, but they've been active. They signed one guy to a 2-way contract, so that's very exciting. But we'd love to do a deep dive into Wolves if you're ready.
Good morning, gentlemen. Happy Reckless Speculation Thursday. Hey, let's do such a good job that maybe 1 year from now, this particular show, maybe this particular segment can be nominated for a Marconi. Congratulations, gentlemen, on the Purple Daily Marconi.
And just complaining about the Vikings so much that they have nominated Purple Daily for a Marconi Award. So pretty awesome. So, hey, real quick here, let's start with a few weeks ago, all of the conversation was about the Wolves pulling off a big blockbuster move, right? John Collins or Ben Simmons. I would put Miles Turner sort of on the fringe of that blockbuster conversation. They made the Taurean Prince trade and dumped the Ricky Rubio contract, so they still have an expiring trade chip if they want to swing it. But where are those conversations now from what you can tell? Have the Wolves moved off of blockbuster and more into sort of smaller, more realistic moves, or are they still trying to swing for the fences behind the scenes from what you know?
Well, Gerson Rosas, Phil, is always going to swing for the fences, but is that realistic when you know that Anthony Edwards isn't going anywhere? Karl Anthony Towns isn't going anywhere. I don't think D'Angelo Russell is going anywhere, but let me remind you that Rosas, in conversations with Daryl Morey, the Philadelphia front office, said in the Ben Simmons talks, 2 guys are off limits. It's Cat, it's Edwards. He didn't necessarily say Russell is off limits, but Philadelphia doesn't want D'Angelo Russell. I don't think there's a huge trade market for D'Angelo Russell. There might be 1 or 2 teams that would trade for D'Angelo Russell, but my sense is if the Wolves wanted to trade D'Angelo Russell, it would not be an easy trade to make. They would have to attach at least 1 future first-round pick to such a scenario. The Wolves are not doing that. So D'Angelo Russell is here. But if we're talking Jaden McDaniels, if we're talking maybe Leandro Bolmaro, their 2022 or 2023 first-round pick. Now, if you go 2022, you want to offer multiple, the Stepien rule, so then you would go the 2024. You want to put protection on those picks. Does that really get you in the conversation for a quote-unquote superstar? It gets you in the conversation for Miles Turner. And I would argue, Phil, Miles Turner would be a needle mover. Like, we can talk blockbuster, superstar. Like, to me, there needs to be one more move before the season starts that moves the needle, which I don't think necessarily necessitates that of acquiring a superstar, like a Ben Simmons. Miles Turner isn't a superstar, but he would move the needle. You would have to give up at least 1 future first-round pick. But my sense, I've been saying this for weeks, you hire Rick Carlisle, you give him 4 years, $29 million. Indiana feels like they can be a top 5, top 6 team in the East. So if you're trading Miles Turner, I'm not saying he's off limits if you're the Pacers. They want immediate return. They're not taking, 2 future first-round picks and, Jake Layman, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, and Jarrett Culver, a bunch of expiring contracts. I mean, that's what the Wolves are trying to do, Phil. They have made it well known to many teams in the league. Here is Juancho Hernan-Gomez. Here is Jake Layman. Here is Jarrett Culver. But, who exactly is that getting you? That is the dilemma. Taurean Prince is an expiring contract too, but the way the trade ended up happening, the day it got announced, he actually can't be combined with anybody else. Like, if you want to move Prince, you can, but you can't move, for example, the way I understand it, you can't then take Taurean Prince and Jake Layman and move them together. So there's some complications there. So, would they move Prince? Sure. But it's a little bit more complicated when he can't be aggregated with another player or two.
What's come close so far to taking place? Has Gerson nearly pulled the trigger on any moves, Dukes?
Well, I mean, I'll cite this Ramona Shelburne, Zach Lowe podcast. The 2 ESPN reporters do an excellent job on Wednesday night, they went back and forth. And Ramona, she's tight with Jeannie Buss, the Lakers owner. She certainly has a good relationship with Rob Pelinka, who runs the Lakers front office. She said that she heard that the Lakers and the Timberwolves were close to a sign and trade a few days ago, where Marc Gasol, expiring contract, he's at the tail end of his career. If you've watched any of, before Spain got eliminated by the U.S., if you watched any of the Tokyo Olympics, Marc Gasol, I mean, he doesn't have anything left. He's done. But then Alex Caruso, good player, he ultimately ended up in Chicago, 4 years, 37 million, but really good, pesky defender. I mean, he would have helped, like the Wolves need all sorts of defensive help. Caruso could have helped in that regard, but clearly it didn't happen. What's interesting, though, to me is, she mentioned how Gasol would have been a salary dump. The Wolves just don't have room to bring on, anybody in terms of a salary dump. I mean, that's Oklahoma City. That's San Antonio. That's teams with cap space. So I imagine that would have involved a third team. I'm sure her intel is pretty good. It also leads me to believe if the Wolves were truly in on Alex Caruso, there are still some guards out there. Like Dennis Schroeder is on the open market. You can play D'Angelo Russell off the ball. So you could make a case for bringing in a guy like Dennis Schroeder. I have not been told that the Wolves are in on Dennis Schroeder, but after reading that Ramona Shelburne, and it was aggregated, I saw it in one of the SB Nation Lakers blogs. So I want to listen to it myself here later this morning. But if that's the case, like maybe the Wolves will chase whether it's Schroeder or some other guard. But like if you're all about talent acquisition at this point, if you look at the free agent market, there's not a whole lot left. Trading for Lauri Markkanen probably is unlikely. Like, I don't know what other trade is out there. So if you're trying to bring in a free agent, a guy that's just sitting out there for the taking, Dennis Schroeder is as good as anybody. So that's something I'll be exploring later today. But I can tell you, as of a day or two ago, the Wolves were not in on, like Kelly Oubre Jr. is a really good free agent still on the board. I can tell you, as of Wednesday, early afternoon, the Wolves had not inquired on Kelly Oubre Jr. As of a couple days ago, they had not inquired on Dennis Schroeder. But I'm just saying I will follow up on that. I was curious on Danny Green. So late last night, he ends up re-signing with the Philadelphia 76ers, 2 years, $20 million. His former agent, Joe Branch, is in the Wolves front office. He's one of the Timberwolves assistant general managers. So I thought, hey, Danny Green, veteran, can knock down some shots. Sure. He can guard some four-men, maybe more three-man, but he can guard some four-men. But no, the Wolves were never in on Danny Green. So, like, I've heard a lot of no's. Like, I've checked on a lot of guys. I thought, would they have some interest in Holmes from Sacramento before he re-upped in Sacramento? No, the Wolves were never interested in Holmes. So it seems like it's a lot of, chatter behind the scenes. But, like, when talking about things they've actually done, I'm running into a lot of brick walls, put it that way.
Yeah. A couple things. So you mentioned Lauri Markkanen, and that would have to be a sign and trade. And actually, NBAanalysis.net, which they drum up some pretty fun scenarios if you ever check out NBAanalysis.net. So they've got some sign and trade ideas involving Markkanen, and this one would sort of fit what you're saying, which is you can't tie Taurean Prince to another player, so you'd have to do it like this. The Bulls would receive Taurean Prince and a 2023 first-round pick that's top 10 protected, and the Wolves would get Lauri Markkanen via sign-and trade, and then it would come down to what does that contract look like, right? Like, how much more? Because I think my question is, Taurean Prince is $13 million. You don't have, you've got some wiggle room, but, it seems like the Wolves are trying to get further away from the luxury tax line, right? And as much fun as it would be, I told these guys last week, Doogie, I mean, you have to be mindful of rim protection and defense at some point, but, if you're hitting a brick wall, trying for the Miles Turners and some of the other rim protectors, it might be kind of fun to just be the most fun offensive league pass team in the NBA. You just have 14 feet of Karl Anthony Towns and Lauri Markkanen jacking threes and Malik Beasley, so I don't know, I would be okay with Markkanen for the right price, but he doesn't help solve your defensive issues. I mean, he's like the least 7-footer in the entire league. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, his rebounding numbers improved slightly this past year. But yeah, I mean, Phil, he's a minus defender. But like, think about Chris Finch, offensive mastermind with Lauri Markkanen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really like that potential marriage. He shot 40% from 3-point range. He's right around 50% from 2-point range. Like, the shooting is borderline elite. Like, you could really do some damage with Lauri and Cat at the 4 and 5 positions on offense. So, yeah, for the right price, I would be intrigued. Now, in a sign and trade, it would have to be at least a 3-year contract. So let's just play out the scenario you just laid out. Taurean Prince, a 2023 top 10 protected first-round pick. Doesn't seem asinine. Like, that to me is a realistic ask if you're Chicago. And I don't think if you're Minnesota, you would scoff at that ask. I'd rather, keep my 2022 first-round pick after not having a 2021 first-round pick. So 2023 makes sense. Top 10. Yeah, you have some protection there. So, yeah, what I need to hear, though, Phil, is that Chicago would be willing to do that. Also, if you're Markkanen, with about half the league looking at cap space a year from now, if you're Markkanen, would you actually think about signing the qualifying offer, then becoming an unrestricted free agent in a year? So how much money are we talking?
Yeah.
Like I was told last night that Lauri Markkanen is a long shot for the Wolves. They've inquired, there's interest, but that the pathway to actually acquiring him is going to be really, really difficult. Would you pay Lauri Markkanen? So would you give up Prince? Would you give up that top 10 protected 2023 first-round pick, then give Markkanen 3 years, approximately $45 to $48 million? So we're talking $15, $16 million a year. Would you pay Lauri Markkanen that? And you're right. Like, the Wolves are about $7 million below the luxury tax line. They do want to keep Jared Vanderbilt. They do want to keep Jordan McLaughlin. You got to pay those guys a little bit. They met with both guys on Monday. So at the start of free agency on Monday, Gerson Rosas, Branch, it was Gupta, and it was Finch. The foursome were in Los Angeles. The first free agent meeting they had on Monday was with Jordan McLaughlin. So they want McLaughlin back, a restricted free agent. They also later on Monday met with Jared Vanderbilt. So they want those two guys back. There's no deal imminent on either front. There's still some work to do on the numbers, but they want both guys back. Let me also remind you, Phil, you could actually go over the luxury tax line now. The goal would be to get below by the end of the season. So you could go over it now, then by April, mid-April, you'd have to get below. So you might have to dump. You might have to make a dumb trade at the trade deadline to get below the luxury tax. Like, you would hate to, or, Jalen Noel is a non-guaranteed contract. It doesn't become guaranteed until, January something. Like, you'd hate to, cut a guy like that to have to get below the luxury tax line. But there are different ways. Like, maybe Jake Layman's expiring contract, maybe he plays well enough that you could dump him for a future second-round pick at the trade deadline, that some contender would say, yeah, Jake Layman is our 7th or 8th man, could help us. So Gerson could, in theory, go over the luxury tax line now, then worry later about getting below it.
So, Dukes, do you feel like a splash move from the Wolves is coming, or could this slow cook continue and they make a move, but not a big move?
Yeah, I mean, probably more so the latter, Judd. I mean, I think, another move is coming. I mean, clearly, they're going to end up re-signing Vanderbilt and McLaughlin, or, if the negotiations crumble, would Vanderbilt sign the qualifying offer, then elect unrestricted free agency in a year. But one way or another, I see both those guys here this next season. At that point, could they add a guy like, Justice Winslow, former first-round pick? Branch in the Wolves front office also used to represent him. I mean, that's a third-wave type free agent, though. I mean, Justice Winslow was a failure. Injuries, but he also was a failure after Miami traded him to Memphis. But, like, could I see them landing a guy like that? Sure, eventually, yes. In terms of a splash move, Judd, like, let me reiterate. Who the bleep wants Juancho Hernan-Gomez, Jake Layman, Jared Culver?
Spain does, Doogie. They want him bad, and the Wolves wouldn't let him play, and I love it.
Well, there's still some friction there. In fact, I was texting with an Eastern Conference front office executive. I just said, hey, anything, hopping with the Wolves, any buzz with the Wolves, he goes, I just keep hearing Juancho is really, really pissed off. So the Wolves are going to have to, if he's here, maybe mend, that relationship to some extent.
Or not.
No, you don't have to.
It is, I will say the fact that he flew out to to Japan. Like
that was the mistake.
Yeah. That's the pain in the ass. By the way, this Reckless Speculation Thursday session here, powered in part by Dennis Kirk. If you like to ride during these summer months, whether it's a Harley, whatever you ride, they got 160,000 parts and accessories in stock, and shipping is free if you spend over $89. So check them out, DennisKirk.com, when the open road calls. So another name that I've seen sort of floated, like, there's all these different amazing Wolves blog sites. And by the way, rest in peace, A Wolf Among Wolves, the platform that launched Zach Harper, Talk Hoops, Steve McPherson, and all kinds of great just people in the Wolves and NBA blogosphere. But there's been a lot of just names sort of bandied about. One of my favorite ones is Chris Boucher, big man for the Toronto Raptors. 1 year left on his deal. He's a rim protector. Toronto looks like, this is the thing, I don't know what Toronto thinks they're doing, but like Kyle Lowry's now with Miami. So if Toronto is going into kind of a 2 or 3 year retooling period, it might make, and they don't think they can pay Chris Boucher, that seems like an interesting, if the Wolves are going to trade for someone that can protect the rim, they could do a lot worse than Chris Boucher, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Like, are there names like that aren't being reported, but they've been theorized about in the Wolves blogosphere, or is it just a complete non-starting type of a name, Chris Boucher?
Well, yeah, and on Wolf Among Wolves, Tim Fackless did a great job trying to keep that thing going, but he works in the educational system. He's being spread thin, so he did all he could to keep that thing going. But you're right. Unbelievable blog on Boucher. Heck, his name was on my radar years ago, Phil, where the Gophers tried to land him. The Gophers legitimately had a shot at Chris Boucher, if I'm not mistaken. He may have taken a visit. I don't remember if it was an official or unofficial, but visited the Minnesota campus years ago. So I remember his name back then. Yeah, right now, sign me up for Chris Boucher. But until I hear, Phil, that Masai Ujiri, who runs the Raptors, is going in on a rebuild, I don't believe that he's available. I mean, other people have brought up the name Pascal Siakam.
Yeah.
What's Toronto doing with Pascal Siakam? Could the Wolves find a way to make a legit offer for Pascal Siakam? I need to hear. They just gave Gary Trent Jr., the Apple Valley native, 3 years, 50-something million. Do you make that move? He's young, but do you make that move if you're going in on a total rebuild after playing the season in Tampa? It looks like they'll now be back in Toronto. With that energized fan base, is that fan base ready after not having basketball live in person this past year? Are they ready for a rebuild? Maybe eventually, maybe they get off to a bad start. Then in season, they look at moves like that. But I'd be surprised, Phil, if Toronto moves Boucher this summer before the start of next season. But yeah, very intriguing name. I like that name a lot if you could find a way.
Mm-hmm.
On the Vikings, Doogie, I'm told that the whole Kirk Cousins non-vax thing is having some far-reaching implications in the building, as far as some people being upset about what his motives are and how, I think the key word here is dedicated to football he is because of this. What are you hearing, and how much do you think, because the Vikings are going to tell us, well, internally it's not a problem. The players are a family. What are you hearing about the friction and potential that this could tear the team apart? Going back to the fact that Zimmer went on with Barrero this week and just basically cut open a vein on Cousins and said he doesn't believe in the protocols. Now, Kirk is supposed to be back today, but Dukes, I got to figure the friction between those two alone could probably start a fire in that building.
Yeah, I mean, Judd, you've been on the beat, for many years. I mean, you've been in the belly of the Vikings beast longer than a lot of people here in town. So when you're saying that, I hope people, are listening closely. I mean, I can offer, a bunch of analysis, but more than the three of us here. So when you're saying that, I hope people are absolutely locked in on that. I don't even know what the hell that means. Like, what does that mean? Doesn't believe in following the protocols. I really don't know what Zim is alluding to on that. I'll tell you this much. So Chad Greenway was on ESPN Sioux Falls. My buddy Jeff up there, JT. And Greenway a few days ago said he's aware of a couple Vikings who would retire before, taking the vaccine. That if the NFL at some point said the vaccine is mandatory, you need to get the vaccine to play, that Kirk Cousins would just retire. Now, Greenway didn't say Cousins by name, but I'm saying I'm led to believe he's got enough money, with his beliefs, he would not take the vaccine. I just don't think he's moving off that stance of not wanting to be vaccinated. So could it create some friction? Certainly, yeah. Coaching staff, Judd, front office. I don't think it creates friction in the locker room until Cousins misses a game, if that happens, or if a game has to be forfeited because of some sort of outbreak. Then you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but if a game is forfeited, guys lose their game checks, right?
I believe so.
There are paychecks that will be missing.
Both teams do.
I can promise you, if it ever gets to that point, now somebody who roots for storylines, sure, give me that storyline that, week 3, week 4, whatever, the Vikings can't play a game because of a mini COVID outbreak. And not only the Vikings, but the team they're playing that particular Sunday, they don't get paid. That would be off the charts. That's when the friction would come into play. But do I sense there's friction in the locker room today? I don't. But yes, coaching staff, front office, there are a lot of people livid. And I just wonder, is there a path to the Vikings moving on from Kirk Cousins after this season?
And we will get into that here on this episode of Reckless Speculation Thursday and some old tweets exposed. But just to be 100% clear, this is the language that came out in, I think it was in July that this officially came out. If a forfeit occurs, this is COVID protocol. If a forfeit occurs, players from both teams will lose their game checks. The team that suffered the outbreak would be responsible for any shortfall in the league's revenue sharing pool and would also be credited with a loss for the purposes of playoff seeding, with the opposing team credited with a win. So, let's say the Vikings and the Packers are set to play. The Vikings have an outbreak. The Packers don't. Everybody loses their game check. So the Packers also lose their game check. The Vikings would owe the league whatever money was lost due to revenue, concessions, all those things. And the Vikings would be credited with a loss in that situation. So,
unbelievable. And when you say outbreak, Phil, it could be one guy testing positive, but then due to close contact, a bunch of guys not being able to play that Sunday. Kudos to the Washington Post for getting the story earlier this week. Now, a few weeks ago, I went on the record saying I was led to believe the Vikings were middle of the pack, maybe lower middle, but a lot of guys, a lot of teams convinced their players, like Washington. The Washington football team was dead last. Then they get to training camp and a bunch of guys, got the first vaccine. So then they start climbing up. But, the Washington Post numbers are pretty alarming. I mean, I guess if you look at the 90-man roster or whatever the Vikings is right now, 88 or 89, they might have one opening, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 players based on the percentage in the Washington Post the other day, 27 players that are not vaccinated. I'll add to this that it's not like guys 70 to 90. Like, I know, and I'm not going to name names. If a guy doesn't want to talk about it, now Harrison Smith has talked that he's not vaccinated. Adam Thielen has talked that he's not vaccinated. We know, based on having to sit out multiple days of practice, that Kirk Cousins, Nate Stanley are not vaccinated. I'm not going to name the other names when they haven't. That's just my own personal policy. I'm not going to name the other names, but I will tell you from a taking snap standpoint, positional standpoint, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, in addition to Cousins, Thielen, Smith, just off the top of my head, I know of 4 other really important players that are 53-man roster locks that are not vaccinated. Now, could one of those guys eventually change his mind? Maybe, but I'm just telling you. Now, I know of 2 fringe 53-man roster guys. Those guys are morons. And I know that the agents for those guys have told them pretty much as such that, listen,
You're not making the team. Yeah.
You're not making the team. They will never admit it on the record. They can't. But you're not making the team. And not only are you not making the team, you are an NFL player, but you're not landing on another roster because of this situation.
Yeah.
Yet it's still not registering with those guys. But I'm just telling you, I know of seven 53-man roster locks, and I think there's probably more than that, but 7 on the Vikings that are not vaccinated.
Yep. And real quick on the Kellen Mond front. So Andrew Kramer from the Star Tribune issued a correction. It was initially thought that Kellen Mond was a breakthrough case, that he was vaccinated and was a breakthrough case, and he's not vaccinated. So the only vaccinated quarterback of the 4 original quarterbacks, I'm assuming Case Cookis is vaccinated, but I'm not talking about the new guys that got brought in. Jake Browning's the only vaccinated quarterback.
They weren't bringing in a new quarterback that wasn't vaccinated. I can promise you that.
Yep. So if you're Zimmer, think about this from Zimmer's perspective. You know that your job is on the line. You know that you're in your mid-60s, and so this might be no guarantees. Maybe he gets hired again if the Vikings let him go, but this is probably his last big shot as an NFL head coach this season. And he's looking around and saying, wait a second, our third-string quarterback, third-round pick, brought this into the locker room, and because all these leaders also aren't vaccinated, they have to sit out. He's thinking to himself, why is my third-string quarterback derailing a week of training camp practice a month before the season, right? And his frustration is valid. If just from a pure football standpoint, his frustration is valid, and I agree with Doogie. I think right now it's very easy, and Anthony Barr came out a couple days ago to say, hey, listen, we all respect each other's beliefs, and we're all kumbaya in this locker room. Well, the minute that you have 4 starters out, or you have to start Jake Browning against the San Francisco 49ers or something, and you miss the playoffs by a game or 2 or whatever it is, this thing is a house of cards waiting to collapse right now if they don't get a higher vaccination rate in that locker room from a pure football standpoint.
Now, can you guys help me out on this? Because you say breakthrough, Phil, but there are more and more examples. In fact, my brother-in-law, somebody you know, Phil, Brian, tested positive the other day. He is fully vaccinated. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, he's doing okay. A little bit of a headache and it's a nasty cold, essentially. He's not going to end up in the hospital, but it's beating him up for a few days. But what exactly are the rules if there's an outbreak and it's started by a guy that is fully vaccinated? Is there some gray area there with this Delta variant impacting people that are fully vaccinated? In
terms of the NFL's protocols, or just you're talking in general?
Well, I'm curious. So, okay, the hypothetical of the Vikings can't play the Bengals on September 12th because they have a bunch of guys that test positive, but those guys are vaccinated.
Yep. So we
still lose their game checks. Do the Vikings still take the loss in the win-loss column?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But they're fully vaccinated.
Yeah, I think if they have to forfeit because they have enough players who have not been vaxxed, that's the problem. So like if a breakthrough case comes into the locker room, okay, Cousins is out, let's say Harrison Smith is out, and let's go down that line. I think that becomes the problem because then you can't field the team, Doogie.
As I understand it, though, the NFL basically said, listen, every team, whether it's COVID or travel issues or whatever it is, you are responsible for having your team ready and available to play when your game is scheduled, unless everyone gets together with the league and says, all right, can we move this thing to Monday or Tuesday? And so if you can't figure out a way to play your game, then you lose game checks and you forfeit. That's how I sort of understand the layout of the protocol.
And I don't think we're going to lose games to that, but I do think that we're going to see potentially with the Delta variant what we saw last year, which is you got to go sign a couple guys. You got to go. So I fully expect that we're going to see games played with not the depth charts and talent that the league wants. I don't think we're going to get to the point of actually forfeiting games. I mean, it wouldn't shock me, but that is worst case. I think it's far more likely that we'll just see depleted teams try and play through and be forced to play through that.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Although, what's the next variant, right? I mean, that's what the virus does. It mutates. Yep, there's going to be inevitably, unfortunately, some other variant. Could that variant be even worse? than the Delta variant. I mean, that's the mystery. But yeah, everything you just said, Judd, makes a lot of sense to me.
All right, we gotta let Doogie go here. Any quick rapid fire scoops before we say goodbye, sir?
Well, credit to Ben Johnson and the Gophers for landing a target that they locked in on. Braden Carrington of Park Center High School was a big-time want. They sealed that deal. Braden Carrington on Wednesday committed to the Gophers. So he is the first player in their 2022 recruiting class. They have a lot of scholarships to offer with that 2022 recruiting class. They continue to work diligently on Farrell Payne, a forward from Park Cottage Grove. They're working diligently on Trey Holloman, point guard from Cretan, Durham Hall. It certainly looks like Holloman is going to end up with either the Gophers or Michigan State. It's a two-team race there. I know there's some other schools publicly in the mix, but it looks like it'll be one of those two. I think the Gophers can land Farrell Payne, who's blown up this summer. But that's a good start for Ben Johnson. I know a lot of Gophers fans were upset a few weeks ago when Damarian Watson, a forward from Totino Grace High School, chose Iowa State. I'll just tell people that things change, that the Gophers did have Damarian on campus after Ben got the job. There was an offer there, but after watching him this summer, they didn't necessarily want to take a verbal commitment from Damarian Watson. And I would still bet on Damarian. I like Damarian, but things change. It's very fluid in the recruiting game. I'm just telling you, the Gophers, they didn't want Damarian Watson. They wanted Braden Carrington. So it was a very good Wednesday for the Gophers men's basketball team.
Nice. That is Darren Doogie Wolfson, 5 Eyewitness News, and the Scoop podcast, which you can find on scorenorth.com, the Score North app, and anywhere you find podcasts. Inside information about Minnesota sports teams. Doogie, we'll catch you next week, man.
Absolutely. Take it easy, boys. See ya.
All right. Inject all of that right there into...
Well,
I need that Minnesota sports inside info vaccine. That's what I need.
I have a feeling that you would like a couple more Wolves moves, though, or just one big Wolves move, or just one Wolves move. One more transaction put you over the top.
That would make me feel comfortable. All of that was also presented by Federated Mutual Insurance Company. Been standing behind business owners for over 100 years. They're one of us, based in Minnesota, Owatonna. And they just provide amazing resources and expertise and knowledge to help your business shield against potential threats. So check them out, federatedinsurance.com. And remember, at Federated, it's our business to protect yours.